Hello, everyone, and welcome to our NCJW webinar on how Israeli women and families are overcoming challenges during COVID-19. My name is Stephanie Rogers, National Board Officer and co-chair of our Israel Committee, and I am based in Chicago. Thank you for joining our webinar series. These webinars give our advocates across the country tools to stay connected to the work of improving the lives of women, children, and families, and advancing the Jewish values that inspire our efforts. Today, we are joined by a number of exciting speakers from Israel, who I will introduce in a moment, but first, some housekeeping. First, everyone's mics are muted and cameras are turned off in order to keep focus on the speakers. We will also have a question and answer portion at the end of the webinar, so put your questions in the chat box and we'll collect them for the end. If you're experiencing technical issues, you can email action@ncjw.org or write a note to the panelists via the chat. Please note our limited capacity while the webinar is running. And a gentle reminder, we will be recording the webinar and we'll upload it to our website. In Israel, NCJW does its work through a gender lens, empowering Israeli and American women to advocate for a robust civil society. As in the US, NCJW brings our unique Jewish women's progressive approach to advancing social justice and gender equality. NCJW and Tel Aviv University, NCJW Women and Gender Studies program partner on the Connecting for Impact, Strengthening the Feminist Ecosystem in Israel, an initiative which brings together extraordinary and diverse Israeli feminist leaders to leverage the collective feminist power for greater impact on Israeli society, improving the lives of women and children. For the past 20 years, NCJW has been investing in non-for-profit organizations through Israel that improve the lives of women, children, and families through the Israel Granting Program. As in the United States, there is still uncertainty about the future of the coronavirus pandemic. Unfortunately, Israel is seeing a second wave of cases. Since the start of the pandemic, the country has experienced a rise in domestic violence and an increase of loss of jobs and social securities, further harming women and families. In addition, we are keeping an eye on the Israeli government that moves closer to unilateral annexation of the West Bank this month. The topic of annexation is important, and we are encouraging you to learn more. In the follow-up email from today's webinar, we will send you the recording of the Israel Policy Forum event, The Road Ahead, Leading Responsibly for Israel's Future, featuring NCJW CEO Sheila Katz, Ambassador Susan Rice, ADL CEO Jonathan Greenblatt, and more. They discuss the concerns around the impact annexation will have on women, children, and families, as well as NCJW's strong commitment to ensuring a secure Jewish democratic Israel. Today we'll be focused on how Israeli women and families are overcoming challenges during COVID-19. We will hear stories from community leaders that will help us understand and learn the impact the pandemic has had on women and families in ways they are spearheading creative, forward-thinking, and inspiring initiatives that are addressing those challenges. Today's conversation will also take us through a virtual Israeli tour with 5 fascinating cities: Tel Aviv, Nazareth, Hod HaSharon, Haifa, and Jerusalem. I am thrilled to introduce you to 5 powerful NCJW advocates who are shaping the feminist agenda in Israel. After each leader tells us stories and shares their work, we will come together for a question and answer portion at the end of the webinar. A reminder to put your questions in the chat and we'll collect them. To save time, I'm going to give you a very short introduction of each speaker. I strongly encourage you to check out the impressive bios using the link that we will share in the chat. First, we will meet Professor Daphna Hacker, who is based in Tel Aviv and is the head of the NCJW Women and Gender Studies program at Tel Aviv University and a full professor at Tel Aviv University Law Faculty. She researches and teaches with a focus on intersection of law, families, and gender. Next, we have Rabbi Ola Weinstein, the director of Project Kesher Israel. Project Kesher empowers Russian-speaking women to be leaders and advocates, building Jewish identity and influencing change on key issues. She's located in Jerusalem. Then we'll jump to Michal Avera Samuel in Hod HaSharon, who is a social leader and educational activist, advocating for the integration of Ethiopian Israelis at Fidel, where she has been the executive director since 2011. We will then travel to Nazareth and meet Fida Nara, who is the Arab-Palestinian co-director of Mahalbach Tajir, whose name means change. It is a feminist grassroots Jewish Arab organization dedicated to a shared society with equal opportunities for all. We will then jump back to Jerusalem with Fanny Sukanek. Fanny is a Haredi feminist social activist. Fanny is chair and founder of Ba'asher Telchi, which means wherever you go, providing support for Haredi and Orthodox women going through separation and divorce. We will finish our tour in Haifa with Liron, who was our NCJW staff representative in Israel. With that, it is my honor to welcome Professor Daphna Hacker.
Hi, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's a great honor to open this event with a very short lecture on coronavirus in Israel. I will share the screen with a short PowerPoint presentation. I hope everybody can see it. So when we're talking about COVID-19, which in Israel is called corona, we can talk about the direct damage that it causes. And in Israel, we are facing the death of 351 people. But when we compare the situation in Israel to that in the US, we see that in the US, it's 390 times higher than in Israel, while the population in the US is only 36 times bigger. So we're doing better, although, as was mentioned, we are facing the second wave. In Australia, to compare another country, they're doing much better than in Israel, with only a third of death, with almost 3 times the population. The average age of death of those who died from COVID-19 in Israel is 81. And about half are women, a bit less than half. And we would expect that the direct damage of COVID-19 would hit women more severely than men, because the average age of women is older. We live in Israel 4 years more than men, but actually it's the other way around. And in other countries, we see the same pattern in even more radical ways, when men die at higher rates than women. And some of the causes are biological. Women apparently have a stronger immune system, but some are also behavioral reasons. Women smoke less and are more careful with the guidelines to prevent infections. So we see that what we call in the literature toxic masculinity is evident also here, when men are not careful enough about their health and are hit harder by the direct risk of COVID-19. But we have learned from this disaster that we don't have to look only at those that are hit directly by the virus, because the closure, the economic price that we all pay, and here you can see additional harms that we learn from by the Statistical Bureau in Israel. And you see the very high percentage of deterioration in emotional well-being, stress, anxiety, loneliness. And what is alarming in the statistics is not only that they're so high, but also that we do not have any idea how many men and women we see here, because the government doesn't bother to collect data through a gendered lens. Domestic violence is something that very quickly we realize is on the rise in this epidemic. More complaints to the police, NGOs reporting from the field that the phone keeps ringing, and it became evident even more dramatically after the closure ended of the first wave, with even more, a bigger number of calls reaching the welfare hotline. And we see different countries responding differently. In Italy, we see a decrease in complaints because the women mistrust the police and the state. In France, there is a minister of gender equality.
Daphne, yeah. Daphne, I'm sorry, but we don't see your PowerPoint.
Oh dear. Okay.
It's okay, we heard you, but share the PowerPoint.
Can you see it now?
Yes, make sure it's all done.
Okay. I apologize.
It's okay.
In Israel, we learned that the government thinks of visiting women who might be victims of domestic violence. This is really a dangerous idea. A better one was collecting weapons for unemployed security guards. It was done. It's really important. The state funded more lawyers to assist battered women in court, and that was again very, very important. But more amazingly is that the feminist field reacted very quickly. Starting in March 24th, a letter to the government calling for assistance now with all kinds of measures that must be taken. The establishment of a feminist emergency headquarters, in which the women that we're going to hear now, Connecting for Impact, that was established by NCJW and the gender program I'm heading. We were part of this initiative. For the first time, a platform that gathered tens of feminist organizations and activists, and domestic violence was at the top of our priority. Dr. Hannah Safran and others, who has managed to create a shift within public discourse, focusing on the batterers and not only the victims, how we remove them from the homes and not the women. And in June the 1st, we had a huge demonstration. You see here a picture from the demonstration. And another amazing thing is, for the first time, we saw a critical mass of men participating in the demonstration, things that we hadn't seen before. So we are already starting to see the impact. In mid-June, the government approves a bill for ankle monitoring to prevent murder and domestic violence. We've been fighting for this bill for several years now, and it's the first time the government is taking this law proposal and promises to pass it in Parliament. June 22nd, the Minister of Welfare promises to allocate the promised budget that was lost in all the election commotion, and to put it in the field, on the ground, assisting women, treating the batterers. Another issue that we are very concerned about is employment. We have a high rate of unemployment now, currently 18%, and this is before the second wave has caused additional harm to Israeli economy. And we know that women are already marginalized within the Israeli labor market, so we are deeply concerned. Just several examples. You see here that we are among the countries with the highest gender pay gap. Israeli women earn on average 68% compared to men. We have high rates of part-time who are women, glass ceiling, of course, women taking a much larger share in the labor done at home, paying a price for that at the labor market. And things that emerged within this crisis, thousands of requests to fire pregnant women, which is illegal in Israel without permission. The government saying, oh, that's okay to fire women. during the crisis, and there was a petition to the Supreme Court to prevent it, and only then did the government withdraw. Additionally, the government did not allow single mothers to receive unemployment allowances if they receive child support supplement from the state. Again, NGOs acting this harsh economic price is withdrawn. Academia, the place I'm coming from, we see that male researchers are publishing more papers now than before the disaster, while female researchers are publishing less. And this is just another example of what we are facing, not only that we won't see the promotion of women's status in the labor market, we are already have the term C-session as to really be concerned of what's going to happen to women in the labor market. Just a glance of new studies that are emerging from the COVID-19 crisis here. It's in Hebrew. I'll just say very briefly that we were hoping that fathers during the closure will realize how important their role might be when they're becoming active parents. But apparently today they are less satisfied with the gender labor division within their families than before the crisis, meaning they have not learned the lesson that we were hoping they will. Divorce, fathers are already asking for court orders for less child support because their income suffers, and we are expecting a wave of divorce in a legal field in which women suffer harsh discrimination. You all know about the get refusal problem, but it becomes more and more unfriendly to mothers due to the battles of fathers groups, the anti-feminist agenda they're successfully promoting. A very important lesson we have learned from this crisis is the crucial importance of intersectionality. And old women, young women with no family support, ultra-Orthodox women, Bedouin women, asylum seekers, women in prostitution, they all experience the crisis more harshly and in special ways than all the rest. So we have to have this intersectional lens to understand reality and properly react. So just to conclude, we have to look very carefully at the gendered outcomes of the closure, especially because we're facing this second wave. This is a picture from what we saw every evening on TV, 4 men explaining us what to do and how to understand the crisis. No women to be seen around most of the tables of policymaking. We need gender sensitive data. We realize how crucial the work of feminist NGOs, and we will hear it from the wonderful women in this panel. We need to monitor the labor force and the state budget. And just to end with some beams of hope, we are facing new ways to combat domestic violence. Hopefully this will continue after the crisis. Unprecedented solidarity and partnership among feminist NGOs, and hopefully again we will manage to learn the lessons, the wonderful lessons from the last 3 months, and to move with it forward. Maybe active fatherhood, again, not all fathers, but maybe a few that will join our battle for shared labor division at homes and at the labor force. The media is very supportive to gender, the gender dimension of the crisis. And maybe more Israelis will realize that we have to move back to the welfare state that protects us all, because we are all vulnerable, not only during COVID-19, but just as human beings. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I think you could start.
Hello, can you see me?
Mm-hmm.
Shalom, I'm grateful for being invited to speak on this wonderful webinar tonight and to have been part of the Connecting for Impact cohort. I'm Rabbi Ola Weinstein, and I made Aliyah from Russia 20 years ago, and I've lived in Israel for half of my life. Last year, I was ordained as a rabbi by HUC of the Reform Movement. I'm the mother of 3, and together with my family, I live in Jerusalem. I'm the executive director of Project Kesher Israel, which is the biggest Russian-speaking feminist organization in Israel. We engage about 5,000 women in our activities annually. Project Kesher Israel develops women's leadership in such fields as state and religion, preventing gender violence, fighting racism, promoting pluralism, and generally advocating for a more democratic Israel. Graduates of our programming usually fight for discrimination, convene at the Knesset, and advocate for equal status of women and girls and immigrants in general, of course. Project Kesher Israel has become a leading voice not only in the Russian-speaking community in Israel, but for all women. Since the very beginning of pandemic in Israel, which happened in March, Project Kesher Israel has virtualized all our activities in response to the situation. We realized that during this period of time of uncertainty and fear, our participants need to feel together and connected. As immigrants living in Israel for various lengths of time, Project Kesher Israel activists are especially vulnerable to economic and social instability, and 50% of our leaders are elderly and living alone. Project Kesher Israel is designed and uniquely positioned for this. When the Israeli welfare system and immigrant services are overburdened, Project Kesher trained leaders provide connection, continued education, inspiration, and emotional support via Zoom, and have become a lifeline for hundreds of Russian-speaking Olim in this critical situation. Since the beginning of the pandemic, Project Kesher volunteers have helped more than 2,000 Russian-speaking pensioners and single mothers receive government food deliveries, driven elderly Israelis to the doctor, shopped for them in pharmacies. During the past 2 weeks, in collaboration with the Ministry of Absorption and the municipalities of Petah Tikva and Ashkelon, Project Kesher Israel volunteers purchased, packed, and delivered food parcels for Shabbat to 100 volunteers, 100 pensioners and single mothers in those cities. This project was underwritten by an emergency grant that we received from the Sephardic Home on Aging. Many women in our network are unemployed, including single mothers and the women who are too young to qualify for pension. In most instances, these immigrants do not have necessary Hebrew skills to understand how to access governmental social service programs. Accordingly, Project Kesher Israel designed a program to help Russian-speaking immigrants with the tools and information needed to navigate the situation in their mother tongue, in Russian. Our financial consultant, Dr. Yulia Kornilov, teaches this program via Zoom on a weekly basis. In addition, Yulia culturally adapts and translates materials with the newest information on rights and benefits available for women in our network. We have observed that as participants receive concrete high-level information delivered in Russian and with a great confidence, they begin to worry less and believe that this difficult time will pass, and there are resources for support. After each program, Yulia offers opportunity for the participants to ask questions, which makes the program even more personal, and they can get advice from a professional. On a weekly basis, we record a 1 or 2 minute long video on the weekly Torah portion that reflects my and Project Kesher Israel's commitment to Tikkun Olam, equality, and women's leadership. There is a tradition that some male rabbis give a brief weekly Torah teaching, Vort, or Parashat Shavua, as we call it. And I am now the first woman rabbi to do so in the Russian-speaking community. And this project has already received beautiful feedback from Israel, Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. And we're reaching thousands of women around the world through this program, and we hope to continue until the pandemic ends, hopefully soon. So thank you so much, and I'm happy to invite my dear friend, Michal.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michal Avera Samuel. I am the CEO of Fidel Association, and I'm an educational and social activist, mother for 3, living in Hod Hasharon, not far away from Tel Aviv. Fidel works, Fidel, it's alphabet in Amharic. It's, we work for integration and of the Ethiopian community in Israel and develop a tolerance and educated society. I would like to share with you 2 inspiring stories from our working with the Ethiopian community during the Corona crisis. Over the years, Fidel reaching 1,000 youth and parents throughout Israel with different programs impacting Ethiopian and non-Ethiopian. When the Corona crisis began, we asked ourselves, the team, what does the community need the most right now? How we can be relevant, available, useful to our community, and how we can be out of the box, think out of the box. The first one is we will start working with...
Michal, I'm stopping for a second. Try to move a little bit from the mic because move a little bit from the mic. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm exciting, Charlie, to share with you my story.
Good.
So,
we can continue.
First, it's working with single mothers. The first group being fired from the crisis. They were single mother. They work in manual labor jobs, public service, cleaning, and suddenly they find themselves without coming and then afraid being without food. Even they were afraid that they were gonna be making a good service of Seder, Passover evening, and as a Beta Israel, as an Ethiopian Jew, the Passover holiday, it's a very huge and a community festival and celebration. So Fidel, as being a grassroots organization with strong presence in the community, with our educational and social media, we start locate the thousands of single mothers who had a difficult economic, to bring and help them with food baskets and computers. We realized that it's the first thing they most needed to survive. And besides bringing food baskets to the families and the single mothers, we start to help them to feel the social security form to get unemployment benefit from the government by explain them by WhatsApp, by hotline in Amharic, phone call. So this was the one thing that we were having impact with the single mothers, that we saw our benefit there. The other thing that we're so proud to talk about is the Young Leadership Program. We discovered how our youth, their talents, and how they work. We work with them many years during the year, and they map in a poor neighborhood, in a poor area, they map themselves the neighborhoods, and they discover who's gonna need it most, the elder, how they can help those elder to buy medicals, to bring food for them, and to get called once a day or once in 2 days, to call and to understand that they need her mostly with their loneliness, because the elder, they were isolated and alone. More than 200 teens, they took this role by taking their old families, their neighborhoods. So we realized that how we were blessed that we create a new young leaders that one day can be lead the Israeli society. They can be part of a wonderful leaders. And basically, we were so proud that we found the strength of the community, how we can work together, and how we can change our mind by changing our tools for the community, for the neighborhoods. So this is help us and to create a new environment during this situation. We know as many Ethiopian women, they get together and create helping alternative because the world didn't support. So we translate all the instruction from the Ministry of Health in Amharic. We send them by voicemail, in telephone and everything. So it was such a powerful moment for us to work together and to see what the future can hold for us to get better understanding the situation, and how we can force actually the authorities to be more prepared themselves for neediest community. This is what we did. Thank you for listening. Take care, be safe. I believe that we don't have a doubt about our power as a woman around the world, around the country. Thank you, and it's my pleasure and honor to invite my colleague, my friend Fidel from the Mapach area. Thank you.
So good evening and good morning, everybody. My name is Fida. I'm a Palestinian woman who live inside Israel. I came from Nazareth, and I have two daughters. I can say that I kind of activist, or maybe very activist woman in the political and the feminist side. I see the relation between both of them. So I will start actually talk about Mapach Tahrir, like you hear in the first of this webinar, is a education feminist grassroots organization, Arab Jewish organization who work in the periphery in Israel, the geography and the geography periphery and the social periphery inside Israel. We have communities in South Tel Aviv, we have communities in very poor neighborhood in Jerusalem, and of course we have 8 communities in all over the country. What's really unique, I think, in Mapach Tahrir, that we work all the last 20 years in building a very empowering communities, poor communities, especially in Israel, to take more responsibility about their life, to work together, to make a change in their life, in their neighborhood, in their villages, or in their cities. And we understand in the crisis of the corona or COVID-19 that the powerful thing that we have here before the crisis, it's continue and it have more power during the crisis. And at the same time, the poor, the people who pay most things in this crisis is poor communities in all over Israel. And I talk about economical price, I talk about the education, online education. Poor communities have a lot of problem. It's not just the problem that people and children don't have laptop or don't have good enough internet to learn in online, It's sometimes that they don't have a space to sit on their home and to learn. But I decide to talk more about the good things, the things that give me more hope, even in the crisis of the corona. So I will start with one example. When we talk about community, we talk about community resilience, which means people feel solidarity with each other. People take responsibility about their life. People think about others and not just about themselves. And this is something good that we hear and that we feel in this crisis in all over the world. But when you have a good work in the community, you can feel that in crisis, that it's work more and more good. So in Mahbakhtar here, each community decide to do what their needs. And they know the needs directly because they are in direct relation. They are part of the community. They are leaders from the community. There are a group of women, group of children, group of youth who are already active in their community. They take responsibility about things that's happening in their community. One of the examples is we realized that most of the children in one of our neighborhood, one of our community, don't have games in their home. So the women decide to collect games from their home or to collect money and to buy games. And when I talk about collecting money, imagine women who put $5. This is a very small money, but she feels that she's part of the community and she puts small money and she's part of a very big project. And we, in this community, it was in Jaffa of Nazareth, a small village near Nazareth, we give more than 800 games for children in neighborhood. And it's something that we collect just from families that don't want these games or from money, small money from women. And we talk about poor neighborhoods. This is what's amazing. You feel that you can give and not just take. You feel that you can be part of making a change. You feel your responsibility in your life and you feel that you can make, it's not just a feeling, it's doing a change and making a change in your community. So collecting, and each community decide to collect whatever their needs. There is communities who collect food, and there's communities who collect, you know, all the things that we need for the corona crisis, because not everybody can buy things for their family. And the other thing that we really feel very, very powerful in this part of the crisis is volunteering and give ideas and think about other. This is how we build a solidarity between the community. And when we have a solidarity between communities, and I don't talk just about Arab communities, I talk about poor neighborhoods in all over Israel, Arab and Jewish. We decide in the crisis, during the crisis, that we will do a national meeting between Arab and Jewish in the Zoom. So one of our meetings, it was more than 100 students who sit together, learn together how they can continue build a relation with the children that they worked with them before the crisis. And suddenly this student start to understand how similar things they feel, afraid, things, the hopes, the problem that they talk about with children, there was the same. So from daily problem in the crisis, Arab and Jewish understand how we are the same and we fact the same reality, which means it's bring more not just solidarity to understand, and actually it's the corona crisis help us all in all over the world, in all over Israel, that we all are equal in front of this virus. And the amazing thing that's happening, then when we have a national meeting for the women, they decide, national meeting for the women, they decide to do a positive campaign, because they say women are the main, they give the power, they give the positive things, they lead their family. Let's give them more positive and idea and talk about positive things that women do in their family or in their community. So our campaign, positive campaign, we call it that the women decide, work more than 2 weeks in the first of the crisis and help a lot of women to understand, even in this crisis, you have the power to make a change in small things and take more responsibility in the community. So this is a really small things that we do during the crisis. And I really want to thank you all for listening, and thank you for the NCJW for this opportunity to talk with this amazing woman. And I want to introduce my dear friend Fanny to continue talking about their work in the crisis. Thank you.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Fanny Sukenik. I am a social activist that works in the ultra-Orthodox Haredi society here in Israel. So in many terms, the COVID-19 is not over for me. Right, just now, even my friends, my relatives are still closed in their cities, closed in neighborhood here in Jerusalem next to me. And it began at the first wave of the pandemic, when we understood that something is going on with the ultra-Orthodox society here, something that it's even worse than other communities in Israel. I know that there's some reason about this, and I don't have enough time to talk about it, but the fact that everything that goes in COVID-19 goes work in the ultra-Orthodox Haredi society makes our work crucial. And I want just to share with you some things that we did in the period of the first wave, and what I think, sadly, that we should continue doing nowadays. So I am the chair and the founder of an organization called Ba'asher Telchi, wherever you go. Ba'asher Telchi helps separate and divorced women in the ultra-Orthodox society, in the religious and the Haredi society here in Israel. And Ba'asher Telchi helps them and their families. So at the beginning, we started as checking our women, our community, more than 3,000 women all over Israel, what's going on with them. Do they have enough money? Were they fired from work? And we discovered that so many women were out of money for food, for kids, and for themselves, that we, for the first time, we sent money and budget to our women. It was the first time that we did it, because in regular days, we don't give charity. Like, this is not what we do. We give them tools to build themselves. But when some women called me and said that they don't have enough money for buying matzot for Leil Seder, and they don't have enough money to buy diapers for the kids, and no one helps them, so we didn't have choice. So for the first time, we sent money. And because of the Haredi neighborhood at the beginning and at the continue of the time were closed, and they don't have the opportunity even to buy food if they want. So we had to send them the money. We had to use the army. We had to use everyone we can. We used ambulance to send money to some of our neighborhood and some of our members that lives in Tiberia, that lives in Haifa. I mean, we tried everywhere. And we sent them games for the kids, because we knew that our mothers, our women are the single mothers, and they're dealing with everything alone. In the ultra-Orthodox society, there is no media. There are no computers almost. And they had to be with their kids 24/7 for more than 2 months. And it was very hard to them. So every night, we did Zoom webinar or Zoom workshop for the women. I think that for 50 women that were connected every night for 2.5 months, it was the first smiling face, mature face that they saw in the day. Every night they were connected, and we gave them a lecture how to deal with the days, how to deal with child support on these days. We have lawyers, we have therapists, we have financial advisors for them. And every night, this is what we done with them. Also, one of the more important things that we did is, before Leil Seder, they were the first time that they had to do Leil Seder by themselves because they couldn't go to anyone in their families. Now, for an ultra-Orthodox woman, Haredi woman, to handle a Seder night by herself, this is something that they couldn't bear. This was something that makes them really cry. So a day before the Seder night, we just arrange a Seder night for our own. We hand out materials, we send them things. We had rabbis to come and to talk. We had a singer to give them some more exciting mood. And we did this for them because we knew how hard it is for them. So this is one thing that we did. Another thing that I was involved to, not in the head of the chair of Ba'asher Talchi, but as a social activist in the ultra-Orthodox society, was action against ultra-Orthodox women discrimination in hospitals and how do we say, and kupot cholim, I mean, in the health service. It was something that I just found out like in a sudden, because I heard a story about a Haredi woman that went to a hospital and she was in labor and they didn't let her come in the hospital because every Haredi woman and every Haredi man were suspected that they have COVID-19, that they have the coronavirus. So they let a Haredi woman wait outside the hospital for 3 hours before they let her in because there was another Haredi woman in the spare room that was supposed to be only for the women, Haredi women that are suspected to be in corona. And this was really a risk for her and for her baby. And I was shocked at the beginning. And then we understood that this is not one story. There were like, I think hundreds of stories like this for Haredi women that were pregnant, that were having their babies, and the hospitals didn't want them to come in. And if they give them to come in, they treat them, you know, sometimes it was just unpleasant, but sometimes it was unprofessionally, and it was really risks the baby. I know 1 and 2 stories about women that lost their babies just because they didn't get the checkups, because the doctors didn't want to come in Bnei Brak. The doctors didn't want to come to certain neighbors, Haredi neighbors in Jerusalem. So one woman came and said that she doesn't feel her baby, and they sent her back just because she is Haredi woman from Bnei Brak, and 2 days later she had an abortion, miscarriage, I mean. And when I understood with my friend that this is what's going on, we had like an emergency Zoom meeting, and we decided to do whatever it takes. So we opened a WhatsApp group that every Haredi woman can join in and tell her story about the hospitals and about the health services, that how do they treat her, what do they give her. If you see the presentation, you see one picture, that there is a picture of a sweater with a yellow stamp on, with a yellow sticker on it. Do you see this? So this is a Haredi woman that came to the hospital to have her baby, and she was marked in this yellow mark, and it was just before the Holocaust Day here in Israel. It was just, we just were so shocked because we just didn't have the, you know, the Magen David on it. It was yellow, it was big, and it was marked that she is ultra-Orthodox women from Bnei Brak, and you should treat her differently, and sometimes not professionally. So we've got all these stories, and we started talking about this on TV shows, on radio, on Haredi media, on the non-Haredi media, everywhere. We start talking, we start using whatever we can in order to make the hospital's principals and the hospital managers and the doctors, the nurses, everyone understand that we're not going to be silent about it, that we understand that they are afraid, and we will do our best in order to make all the Haredi women aware and careful and keep them from being infected. But this shouldn't be a way to treat them unprofessionally and unnicely on that when they are coming to having their baby. Imagine the experience that a new mother have when she's looking for, when she's waiting to have her first baby, and the maid woman, the nurse that's supposed to help her, doesn't want to get close to her because she's afraid, because she's ultra-Orthodox Haredi women. So we did all this, and we also wrote a letter to the health ministry, and we collected signatures of so many organizations that stand with us and said, this is wrong, you shouldn't work like this. The health ministry should write down specific and criteria, and all the hospitals should work according to this criteria. And this makes a lot of noise in the country for some days, some weeks, and hopefully it make a change, because people understand that although we had more COVID-19 in our community, this is not the way to treat this. So this is on the, like, very small from what we did all this time in our community and in our friends. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Daphna, Olya, Michal, Fina, and Fanny. I know there are many questions that we have after hearing about your thoughtful stories that you've shared with us. First, I want to put a question out to our audience, which is in the chat. Please share how you plan to bring these stories back to your sections and community. While you guys are answering that, I'm going to start out with some questions for the panelists. The first one is actually probably to go right back to you, Fanny, which is in Corona, how is the tension between the secular Israelis and Haredim?
Well, there was tension on the first wave, and in the second wave nowadays it is so much worse. I mean, we just feel that as a community, I'm speaking as a member of the ultra-Orthodox community, I feel that the government, the state uses us as specific role models for the infected people. And in order to see that they're doing something, they're doing action toward us that is not the right things. I mean, we have specific data in our community that needed to be treated differently from the secular community. We had big families, we live very crowded, we don't have enough places. So to tell us just close in your neighborhood means that they just bring us all together to be infected. And there is a lot of anger in the Haredic society nowadays. We're trying to make our best in order to improve this and to make context between the secular world and the Haredi community. But when it goes up from the government, I mean, when the government makes the difference, when the government says that this is all about the Haredi communities, Haredi society, this is really hard for us. So I am really fighting on this fight right now, and it is a hard battle, really.
Thank you, Fanny. In just looking at the clock, I am going to, there's a lot more questions, but I want to be mindful of the clock. And our speakers have graciously offered to stay on for an extra 15 minutes after. But for those who need to jump off, I'm going to turn it to Liron, our representative in Israel, as she officially closes our webinar with what we can do and learn and stay involved. And then we will bring everybody back for an extra for the rest of the questions.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I want to take the opportunity before we close the official hour to thank everyone who joined NCJW webinar on how Israeli women and families are overcoming challenges during COVID-19. The recording of the webinar will be shared soon on our website with everyone who registered. I also want to thank all the wonderful speakers here today that you heard, our dear partners, Professor Daphna Hacker, Fidel Nara, Michal Avera, Samuel, Rabbi Olya Weinstein, and Fanny Sukenik for their wisdom, expertise, passion, and commitment to make Israel a better place for everyone, and especially for women and families. We can hear from your stories that there's much we can learn from the work that has been done that illustrate the importance of feminist leadership and grassroots activities in order to make lasting and change in the society. And we can see again and again that both in Israel and in the States, we need the importance of combining both community work and advocacy, as we also do in NCJW. We want to encourage everyone to continue the conversation that we just started here and invite you to get involved in our Israel work. And we can do that in different ways. We want to encourage you to share today's information and stories with your families and communities. We want to encourage you to bring NCJW affiliated Israeli speakers to your communities, to your sections, congregation, and other places you think they should come and speak out. We want to encourage you to learn more about our IGP, Israel Granting Program, and Connecting for Impact program that those women that we just heard are part of, and it's all in our website. So please, if your sections or whatever you are now want to get more involved in our work, you can contact me. There is my email information, and I'll be happy to think together how we can work on our Israel work and be involved and make you be involved in the work we do. And finally, we want you to get excited for our upcoming NCJW webinars and events. Join NCJW and Dalia Litwick, who writes about the court and the law for Slate and hosts the podcast Amicus on Monday, July 20 at 4:30 p.m. on our NCJW webinar. After the dust has settled, the Supreme Court turns in review. On Thursday, July 23rd on 5 p.m., we hope you can join our town hall with NCJW CEO Sheila Katz. And in early August, we're excited to host our second Digital Lobby Day. We will be advocating for abortion access for all by calling on Congress to pass the Women's Health Protection Act and the Health and the Each Woman Act. So I'm officially want to thank everyone again. If you need to go, and for the one who want to continue the conversation, I want to invite all our wonderful speakers to stay on. And let me start by asking questions about collaboration, because we saw in these times how much it's important to collaborate on different topics, on different issues. And we know that a lot of you and a lot of the Connecting for Impact cohort were part of the Feminist Emergency Task Force that was very active during this time. So if you can share stories from that and why you think it was important, and maybe lesson learned for our colleagues and friends in the US about collaboration in times of crisis. So whoever want to join, you can jump in.
I'd like to say a few words if possible.
Yeah, please.
Well, as far as all of us unfortunately know, that during quarantine, domestic violence increases and intensifies. So Project Kesher Israel has hired psychologist Ella Berchansky, whom I was lucky to meet in our NCJW cohort. She is a teacher and a speaker, and we decided to together create a series of webinar programs where Ella will teach on growing domestic violence that happens right now in Israel. And as we heard already, Professor Daphna shared with us the information. So Ella is the founder of the Russian-speaking Women's League in Israel, and she is practicing therapist for many years and a feminist activist. And the Project Kesher participants in Ella's program may learn how to identify domestic violence, whether it's physical, mental, and or financial, to recognize the signs of in their own lives probably, or the lives of the other women in their communities and their Project Kesher groups across the country, and how to learn how to appropriately support women at risk or to refer them to additional services. So that's what we have been doing all this time as well.
Great. Fida, you want to say Fida was very
actually,
and Fanny were very active at the committee of the emergency task force. There still are. So if you want to share a few insights or lessons from that.
I just want to say I see our activists to build the committee now for feminist action in Israel. I see it as a process continue for our work in our group that we started the last year with you, Liron, with the NCJW. We were there women from all over, from different feminist organizations, from different places in Israel, from different fields, talking in the feminist issue, that we understand that we are more ready now to work together. In the situation in Israel, when we talk about feminist organization, we talk about Palestinian organization and Jewish organization. We talk about Mizrahian organization, and there is no Ashkenazi organization, but we talk about Orthodox organization, and we talk about different fields, South and the middle of Israel. And we came from different perspective, but we understand before the crisis, actually, and we want to do the big event together to start think how we can work together. And then we have the crisis. And I think it's amazing, the crisis of the coronavirus, the thing that we don't know exactly how it is, bring us all together, women from all over Israel, different organizations, sit together and try to see how we can fight. Especially we start with the issue of violence against women. But from that moment, like Fanny said, we talk about different, I never hear about what happened to Orthodox women when they enter the hospital. I just know it from Fanny and from the coalition and from our work. So if we can say something about a coalition, about working together, about is building the power as a woman to make a change in this reality, for justice, for equality, and for making a change for a better place for all of us. So this is something that, you know, I talk now and I feel that I'm with a lot of hope, but I'm very realistic. I know exactly in which reality I live inside Israel. I know exactly in which reality we live in all over the world. But still, I cannot lose my hope, especially when I feel if I need anything, I can call any colleague from here, from our group, Liron, or from the Amate, from the committee, the task force, the feminist task force. So this is amazing. That's how we can open doors for each other. That's how we can build a power. That's how we can make a change. We are just in the beginning. I really believe that we can continue. There is a lot of problem, a lot of discussion. We are not agree about everything. And I remember one of the words that I hear when we were in DC, not leaving the table. This is something that I will never forget. I hear it from Nancy, and I hear it and when I see the power of women in the same place in the NCJW meeting, the big meeting in DC. So not leaving the table, not losing the hope. This is, and it's hard. Believe me, it's really hard, but I think we are more ready for this as a feminist organization, as a feminist activist. And I think the field need this because this is the only way that we can make a change here.
Liron, if I can add, I think one of the things that happened is that during the crisis, organization put their ego aside, and they realized that when one organization is publishing a report, nobody listens. These are hectic times, and you have to get the attention of policymakers and the media. But once 20 organizations sign a petition, or 30 organizations are writing a letter together, and while doing so, the headquarters allowed those who are experts in specific field to lead the way, and all the rest of us joined. So we developed all these methodologies in which ego is aside and we are just focusing on the target, realizing that together our power is so much bigger than divided. And I hope this lesson and these methodologies will continue onwards, because again, as Fidel is saying, this is a hard battle. We are usually in the opposition, and the public doesn't always understand what we mean and why we are talking about social justice and gender and women's and families' needs. The terms in the discourse were very militant, And we saw, as I said, men on television telling us what to do, and that the home is the safest place when we know that for so many women and children, it isn't. So again, I think together we just saw how only together, this is the only way we can make an impact.
Yeah, I have to agree, and I think there were opportunities, and there still are opportunities in crises like that of making things differently and to work more collaboratively and move forward to the society that we want to see for all. Anyone else from the panel that want to react to that question, or I can move to other question that was raised here? Fanny, you want to say something about collaboration at the?
I think that Fida already said it all.
It was well said.
I agree, yeah. I agree with everything
Okay.
she said. Yeah, just a note that as a Haredi feminist, it is really hard to find a place between the feminist organization generally in regular times, because you know the Haredi society is more conservative. Feminist is not a word that you should use at all, and if you're a feminist you're not Haredi, and if you're Haredi you're not a feminist. And being on this table and sitting in the task force with all the feminist organization and putting in Haredi women to be part and to be involved, I felt that this is something that if there is something good that went from this COVID-19 challenge, this step was one good thing that happened. So I thank for the opportunity, and I know that this is only the beginning.
There is one question here, maybe Michal or maybe others will want to answer, about what will you do, if anything, about the lack of willingness of the men to help take on domestic responsibilities and caretaking at home? Like Daphne, I think, spoke about it a little bit in her presentation. The little hope that happening in those times is the fact that fathers and men were part of the day-to-day at home with the family, and how can we ensure that this experience will stay or will continue?
I think that during the last few days, we saw the Israeli Women's Network campaigning, launching for fathers' paternity leave after a baby is born. And this is an issue that we've been talking on for at least 2 years, but only now, after the closure, the public is willing to hear, and we see fathers coming out telling their stories. So I think this is one example of how to make sure that you get the attention of the public of issues that we know are there, but now we have a second chance.
Mm-hmm. Michal, you want to?
If I can add, especially with the Ethiopian community, the house very tiny and large families. So the violence and the attempts, it was very increased during those time. We got a lot of call from women that are asking for help and support. In the other side, we engage the rabbi, the Kesim, to spoke a lot about relationship, about being together, about how the man can be more effective in a radio in Amharic, in TV. This is something that we encourage, but we know there is a increase about the violence with Ethiopian women's other family, unfortunately, during this time.
Thank you, Michal. There is a question here asking, I don't know who can address that are pharmacies in Israel experiencing a shortage? Like there's not enough medicine, like in the US. What do you think? I actually don't really know.
This is not the issue now. The issue is now that Trump has prohibited the exportation of the only medicine that assisted severe cases of COVID-19 to Israel as to other countries. So this is now the fear of doctors, that we might see more harsh cases because we have no access to the medicine that is produced in the US.
Mm. If we leave the webinar or the conversation with one questions of like lesson learned for next, because I think Corona and COVID-19 is not gonna leave us, unfortunately, not in Israel and not in US. And maybe we can ask like one sentence from each of you of things you think you should either do differently if there is a second wave, and unfortunately I think there is now in Israel, or think you think need to happen on a social change arena and the feminist arena. So one sentence to close, like what are like next steps for you?
Well, as for us, I think we would use much more webinars as a tool, because we've never reached to so many participants before, and we would use more direct services, because this is how our community stays together and feels that they are together.
Great.
For us, it's to change the tools and to adapt for the new situation, how we can change and to be out of the box, working with the community.
Wonderful.
I can say that for us is it's not different. It's just more solidarity and more grassroots work. This is the main thing that we do all the time, but we know that in the crisis we need to have more solidarity. And I hope for all of us, the Corona crisis will bring us to do more justice for everybody.
For us, I think is an understanding that if we wouldn't stand for us as a women, as an ultra-Orthodox women, no one would do this for us. We should bring up to the tables our needs and to sound our voice very strongly, and to ask others to join us, to help us, or to fight back. And for me, as the chair of the organization, it's meaning to help the women, the single mothers, women, and the family to adjust to the new situation, because it is not going to end. And we find them struggling very hard, and to find tools and to develop tools to help them as a single mother in the ultra-Orthodox society adjust the situation and get stronger from this.
I can add that as far as the emergency headquarters is concerned, what is now on the table is realizing that we have to monitor the budget of the state very carefully, because everything now is about where the money will go, who is going to be supported, how much money will go to women's issues and concerns and needs, and how much money will go elsewhere. So what the headquarters is now focusing on is on the budget that it will be proposed to Parliament. And we are all going to screen it very carefully because, as Liron says, the crisis is not over and the outcomes are going to stay here for a long time. So we all have to be very attentive on how social justice is translated into money for the long run and the short run.
Thank you all. So I think we're about to close, and I want us all to leave with the inspiring words that were this hour together. We have heard words of hope and of collaboration and of understanding that it's important not to leave the table in order to move forward, and that women can make an impact and make change in societies. And we saw that in the stories that we heard, and we know it's happening also in the US in NCJW sections and activities that is happening all over. I want to thank again everyone, the speakers and the participants, and again encourage you to reach out, and you can email me and be in touch, and we're really happy to continue the connection, the conversation, and continue the path together that we started a long time ago. So thank you everyone, and Stephanie also for the beginning, and have a great continuing of the day, and for us it's for the night. And stay safe and healthy, and we'll be in touch. Thank you, everyone.